Okay, well, welcome everyone to this seminar made by Sport about the Club in Crisis Fund, and I'm welcoming you on behalf of Active Humber, North Yorkshire Sport and the Two Ridings Community Foundation. Robin, if you could just do the next slide for me, please. So I noticed that most of you muted your microphones. That's great, and if you want to switch off your webcam just in terms of the internet speed. As ever, we're reliant on IT systems, so hopefully that won't break down this evening. And the webinar, as Robin's already said, will be recorded and it will be shared. And what I will say, there's quite a lot to go through. We will be going to a question and answer session, but if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat function and we promise that we'll answer them for you. If we can't give you an answer tonight, either Roxy or one of the panel tonight will get back to you with that. And also want to start the follow-up conversations, which there's some help and support from Active Humber, North Yorkshire Sport in support of the Two Ridings Community Foundation. Next slide, Robin. So who's going to be speaking tonight? Well, there's me on the left-hand side. I'm going to talk a little bit overall about the fund. Then I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Sarah, who's going to explain a little bit more about what we mean by sport for development. Then Roxanne from the Two Ridings Community Foundation, and they actually hold the funding. So Roxanne's going to talk about how to apply for a grant, the application process, eligibility, and then as you've got your host already, Robin, he's going to do the question and answer session and then close the session down. So next slide, please, Robin. So what we're going to cover, well, the welcome purpose session, I'm going to do that. We'll talk about what the scheme is, what support the two active partnerships can offer you in terms of as you go through the Two Ridings Community Foundations, obviously any questions, and then what might be the next steps. Next slide, please, Robin. So what is the funding for? Well, it is primarily for sports clubs or organisations working within sport, working within the sport for development sector. And I said Sarah will talk a little bit more about that, about the broadness of what that means. It's also to be able to demonstrate how the COVID-19 pandemic has adversely affected you as a club, either operationally or financially. Here's some help and possible support for you to get through these challenging times. And then if you need that funding to say resume or adapt your activity, this could be the fund for you. Next slide. And the funding criteria, just which Roxanne will go into more detail shortly. It's sports and clubs organisation, take that effect where it is, and funding saving review it. So lots of things. Next one, Robin. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Sarah now to take you through what we mean by sport for development and some of the key areas that your activities, if you can help and support these type of things, you'll certainly be eligible for funding. Over to you, Sarah.
Lovely, thank you, David. Okay, so what is sport for development? I guess really for me, that's the technical term when we use sport and physical activity to deliver some wider social aims. I guess really crudely put, it's sport and physical activity, it's the engagement tool that's bringing everybody together. Next slide, please, Robin. Okay, so within that, what is the funding for? Made by Sport is looking for activities that deliver against the 5 outcomes that you can see on the screen. We're going to look at these in more detail on the following pages. I'm going to do my best to give some live examples of some projects that I know clubs deliver and some more broader ones of the types of activity that it encompasses. Next slide, please, Robin. Okay, developing life skills. I wanted to give this example to you because it's probably one of the best that I can think of. So we actually have a couple of clubs that deliver a few different sports, but Special Olympics, Hull, got a swimming edition, and obviously swimming is the sport that they do, and they actually go away and compete, but it's very much, the focus is very much around helping those young adults develop life skills such as booking a hotel, looking at independent travel and things like that to get there. Sorry, I should have said Special Olympics is for children and adults with learning disabilities. Next slide, please. Okay, improving mental health. This can actually be quite wide range of things, because sport and physical activity by its nature is a real positive activity, and you can use that as sort of a way to bring people together. You've got walk and talk that England Athletics deliver, but this is probably one of my favourite examples that I wanted to bring to you. So Hull Table Tennis Club, they deliver a session called Tea, Toast and Table Tennis, and it is a very specific session run during the day, and it's all about reducing social isolation and improving mental health of their, it's actually older adults, that one that they target with that the retired cohort. Next slide, please, Robin. Okay, reducing crime and antisocial behaviour. So this is really largely, if you think of the activities that provide positive activities for young people at times and places where antisocial behaviour might be a challenge. So if you think of some of the sort of twilight sessions and some of the youth outreach that Irvas do, that's probably a really good example of that one. Next, please, Robin. Okay, so employability skills. There's sort of lots of good examples of this across our sector. Netball, gymnastics, really big on their leadership academies, where they get their young leaders in, upskill them, and basically build those sort of skills that they can take into. It might be college first, and then obviously later into employability. Same with the clubs that have the really great volunteer programs, where maybe there is a little bit of upskill and formal qualifications going hand in hand. And we do actually even have a couple of gymnastic clubs that do apprenticeships. So that would be a good example of that. Over to you, Robin.
You just got one more slide on building strong
Sorry,
communities.
is this for me?
Yeah.
Okay. Apologies. So building stronger communities. This is quite an interesting one. We do have another really good example in Hull of the Hannah World Cup. Brings all the different communities together for that sort of that celebration, with football being that vehicle that does that. And then you can also look at some of your targeted provision that is specifically at marginalised groups. So that would be the groups that are probably least likely to benefit from being physically active. So ethnic diverse communities is quite a big one in for that. So it could be an asylum seeker specific activity, again, or you could look at activities specifically for people with disabilities. Now that's my last one. Apologies.
Over to you, Roxanne.
I'll unmute myself. So just to build on what Sarah was saying, these are a couple of examples. We've already had one round for Made by Sport. Many of the applications that came in didn't quite meet the criteria, but some of the projects that we funded was Driffield Town Cricket Club, Howden Football Club, and that was to provide equipment to help them develop their young girls teams. And City of Hull Boxing Club, they were awarded a grant to contribute towards young people volunteering and completing their coaching qualifications. I've had this conversation with David already from Active Humber. I think people see the guidance notes and think it's quite narrow, but actually I'm sure many of you are running your activity when antisocial behaviour is happening, or what you're doing is you're encouraging young people to communicate with each other. So they do meet those criteria, and it is broad, it just seems quite narrow. So I'd really encourage your groups to ask questions here or get in touch afterwards if you're still unsure. Next slide, please. So how much can be applied for? It's a one-off grant of £2,021 because we're in the year 2021. You can apply for less if you don't need the full amount. What I would encourage though is apply for that total amount. And if we reduce it, we try not to reduce it, but we might do a little bit. There's £60,000 left to distribute, so plenty of money to go out across the area. We've only got, this is the last round, so yeah, encouraging applications. Next slide, please. What can the funding be spent on? It's a completely unrestricted grant, so it could be to run projects, it could be for core costs, it could be, as I've said, coaching. it could be equipment, you need new kit, or you need new footballs, boxing gloves, whatever it is. You can apply for small capital costs. So that could be, you need a laptop to be able to keep registers at your sessions, and that's fine, but it should only form a small part of the application. But yeah, it's completely unrestricted grant, so you can do with it what you want. Next slide, please. How will applications be prioritised? This criteria, it's been set by Made by Sport. We've tried to make it as flexible as possible and as open as possible, but we are limited in what we can do. There is a focus on organisations where young people make up the significant majority of the participants. And when we say young people, that's literally 0 to 25. But that will just be one of the criteria if it becomes oversubscribed. The next one is we look at the income turnover. So the maximum is up to £75,000. And again, if the scheme's oversubscribed, we'll look at those with the under 25,000 first, and then under 50,000, then over 75,000. As I've already said, if it's like the first round, we're not necessarily expecting to have to go down this priority. It's just if we get oversubscribed, this is how we'll look at it. Geographical location, there's a focus on areas of high deprivation and areas with high levels of crime and antisocial behaviour. And then the final criteria that we'll look at in terms of prioritising is work with young people who are typically underrepresented in sports. So this could be women and girls, ethnic minority groups, people with disabilities. And again, that's criteria that's set by Made by Sport, that they're just keen to make sure if there's any gaps, they've got funding distributing in those areas. Next slide, please. The eligibility criteria. So groups should be based in North Yorkshire, York, East Riding or Hull, or they can be working in. I know I've had an email earlier in the week about a group that was, I think, based in North Lincolnshire, but working in our patch. That's fine, as long as you can say the money should be predominantly ring fenced for North Yorkshire, York, East Riding, our patch. That's absolutely not a problem. Be a small voluntary organisation, community group, registered charity. We do accept applications from community interest companies, companies limited by guarantee as well, as long as they've got a suitable not-for-profit clause and can show that they are working to support the community and it's not something that they're trying to get profit from. Do need to have a governing document, constitution, just something to say this is how we manage ourselves. Have, as already discussed, have an income turnover under £75,000. We do require organisations to have a management committee with at least 3 unrelated members and preferably the majority unpaid. But again, we can have conversations with you if you don't quite meet that criteria and just see if we can offer any leeway on that. And then the final thing is you need to have a bank account in the name of the group organisation with 2 unrelated signatories on that. And that's all our criteria. Yeah, next slide, please. So the application process, we can directly support you, and we don't just say this about Made by Sport, we say this about all of our funds. Give us a call or email us. We're probably best placed to help you and tell you whether we think the application will meet the criteria, what we think the chances of success might be. It's a completely online application form. It's quite a long form, and again, it's something that we wouldn't necessarily like to do, but it's been given to us by Made by Sport. Lots of it's just tick boxes and drop down fields. So hopefully, yeah, quick and easy. And if you can say it in 10 words, please say it in 10. We don't want essays. I think there's like 1,000 word limit, and people often try to reach that. That's not what we're looking for.
Okay, I think we can go. Yeah, I don't know how the last 2 bullet points we've got there, Roxanne, so we can ignore those.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I thought earlier on, I opened it again, I thought, I don't remember those being there. Yeah, those last 2, please ignore. It's not National Lottery or Sport England. All decision making will be made by 2 ridings and an external panel. Yeah.
Brilliant. Next slide, I think, Robin.
Next slide, yeah.
And I think it's back to you, Robin, to do the question answers.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So yeah, that was a really quick whistle-stop tour of this fund. As you can see, or as has been said, there's 60 grand still available to be applied for. So yeah, get your applications in. Now is an opportunity for you to ask questions. So please raise your hand or put a question in the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer it for you.
I'll just quickly add the closing date is the 16th of August, and decisions will be mid-September, and you can get all the information off our website. Sorry, and I can see Frankie had her hand up then.
Frankie, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Is this pot of money different to the Sport England recovery funding, or is it part of that sort of same scheme?
No, it's completely separate. There is a question on the application form which asks if you've had any grant funding from those organisations. We don't consider that as part of the criteria, though. It's more just, I think, the government trying to see who's had what from where, but it doesn't form any of our decision making.
Okay, great. And my second question was, I'm here like representing university teams at the University of York, and the way their bank accounts work is they all kind of come under our students' union. But if a club was to apply, obviously just for themselves, I'm not entirely sure if their bank account is named as the name of the club, but it would probably be named as our students' union. Is that acceptable, or would that make them illegible?
No, we can definitely work around that. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great, thank you.
We'd just ask for a quick email just to assure us that it'd be ring fenced for the club.
Okay, fab, thank you.
Okay, Roxanne, we've had a question come in on the chat. Presumed turnover is the amount of income rather than profit. We're in our own facility and do the government grants during COVID take us over that? I presume that makes us ineligible.
So what we're saying, because we know organisations will have had a weird last financial year. Some may have, like you've suggested, Julie, you've managed government grants during COVID. That's fine. We'll look at what would be your last normal year. So if the income's under 75,000, you're eligible, and it is total income. It's not just profit.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Neil and Jane are applauding that. And Peter, you've got your hand raised if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, hello, can you see me? Because I can't see if anybody can see me, that's all.
We can hear you, Peter.
I can't see you, but I can hear you. So
yeah, that's good enough. You don't want to see my face. Anyway, I'm Peter, so I'm from Bridlington. I think I've had a lot to do with the Baptist Place, running East Riding Boxercise, helping the kids at the Baptist Place who are quite deprived in Bridlington. I'm working with Evers, East Riding Voluntary Action Services. So when this application goes through, how long will it usually take for it to get processed through?
Yeah, so all applications will be looked at mid-September. I think we've got a date around the 20th of September. all will be looked at on that day, and it'll be that same week that you'll be notified of the outcome.
No, brilliant. Good stuff. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Neil and Jane, you have a question?
Yeah, we work with a couple of organisations that I think would be interested. One is quite a broad one, and I just wondered whether or not you'd be able to cover it because of its wide geographical area. So we work with Yorkshire Disability Cricket, and they've had a massive impact, obviously due to COVID, and particularly because they're very vulnerable individuals. And they've all got physical and/or learning disabilities, but they're not. I would have to check. Would I have to check all the addresses of each individual player to see if they fell within that area, or would it be where the organisation's registered? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think it may have been you that I received the email about. Just checking. That's absolutely fine, as long as you can say we do have players that come from your patch. We're not going to start asking you exactly how many. It'd be really good if you could give some sort of rough percentage, but yeah, please don't put yourself out trying to get exact numbers for us.
Thank you. And then just as an add-on to that, then there are quite a few young people, but because of the nature of their disabilities, we have got older people. In fact,
yeah,
we've got one who's 87. But I presume because of the disability sort of category, then that would sort of be okay anyway.
Yeah. Again, age is something that we think will end up being quite low down on when we come to prioritise. So don't worry about that either. There is a question on the application form that asks about your age groups. Just answer it as honestly as you can. But yeah, don't be too concerned about it.
That's brilliant then. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Fantastic. We've got no other hands popping up, or no chat coming through the box. I think we'll just give it a minute just in case anything else is coming through. And while we're doing that, I think it's a good idea just to kind of introduce a few people who may be there to assist you with your application, or if you've got any ideas, just to run it by. So Sarah, you will know obviously who took us through part of the presentation. One of my colleagues at North Yorkshire Sport is Lucy, and there are her details on there next to Sarah's. And then obviously you've got Roxanne, who has just answered all your questions there. So I'll just leave that on for you to make a note of those contact details.
I'll just pop in the chat as well the link to the fund on our website. You can request an application form from there as well. As I said, it's all completely online.
Thanks, Roxanne.
Just before we go, there is a question in the chat. I don't know if that was picked up from Julie. We picked that one up?
Yeah.
Yes, we did, yes.
Sorry.
Well, you just missed that.
The question in the chat was around if you've received any grants over the last year that might take you over that £75,000, but because last year was a bit of a different year, they'll go back further to look at your normal accounts, if you like.
And that's the same, I guess I should say that just about all the questions on the application form. We're quite happy for you to answer them based on what a normal year would look like, recognising that the last year was very different for most organisations. And although the fund's called Clubs in Crisis, you don't have to be completely running out of money and ready to fold in order to apply. It was, just the name given to it. I think that's what puts some people off applying as well, thinking that they need to be in this really bad state, but that's not the case.
Brill. So if no one has any more questions, that is the end of the presentation. So a quick half an hour there. So we're going to hang around for a few more minutes if you do think of any questions. Along with the recording, which we'll distribute next week, I'll also put on there a type form questionnaire, just so you can tell us how this webinar was and give us any feedback. And if you are planning to apply for the fund, that'd be most appreciated if you could fill that in. It'll only take a couple of minutes. But apart from that, there you go. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.